It started on a Tuesday evening, the one night of the week that was supposed to belong to us. Tuesdays were my ritual, my proof that love could still be chosen on purpose, even after 4 years. I had spent over an hour roasting chicken the way he liked it, skin crisped, just right, the way he once told me his mom used to do it before she passed. I ironed cloth napkins that morning like a woman trying to press hope into clean lines. I lit candles because months ago he'd laughed and said candlelight made everything feel like the beginning again. At 7:30, he walked in with his phone pressed to his ear, laughing at a joke I couldn't hear. His expensive shoes clicked across our hardwood like he owned the air, like my effort was just set dressing. He didn't even look at the table. He didn't even look at me. He drifted straight into our bedroom, still on the call, his voice floating through the apartment, warm, intimate, familiar in a way that didn't include me. And then I heard it. I know, right? That's what I said. She's sweet. Just one word. She. But it landed in my chest like something sharp and deliberate. I kept holding the serving spoon. My hand stayed steady in a way that scared me, because my body was reacting faster than my mind could catch up. My throat tightened, like it was trying to swallow a scream and failing. I stood there in the candle glow, listening to the man I loved speak about another woman, like she was a secret he enjoyed saying out loud. 10 minutes later, he came back, phone finally silent, and slid it into his pocket with the casual grace of someone who believed he'd done nothing wrong. He smiled at me. That smile, the one he used when he wanted something, or when he wanted me to stop asking questions before I even asked them. "Sorry," he said, sitting down like this was still our Tuesday. "Jessica was having a crisis. You know how she gets." I poured his wine. I served his plate first. And I watched the person I thought I was building a life with prepare to tell me, calmly, politely, that I wasn't impressive enough to keep. And the worst part? He thought I would thank him for his honesty, because he didn't realize that while he was aiming higher, I had already been quietly building a life he never deserved to stand inside. I'm Lena Thompson, and I'm the kind of woman people underestimate on instinct. Not because I'm weak, because I'm quiet on purpose. I'm 31. I work a normal corporate job on paper, and I've spent most of my adult life learning how to look unthreatening. Not in a pathetic way, in a strategic way. There's a difference. Some women soften themselves because they're afraid. I softened myself because I understood something early. When people think you're harmless, they show you who they really are. Daniel loved that about me in the beginning. He used to call me steady, like it was the highest compliment he knew how to offer. Like being steady meant I would never become complicated, never ask for more, never shift the ground under his feet. We met 4 years ago at a friend of a friend rooftop thing, one of those city gatherings where everyone pretends they're casual while quietly evaluating each other. I'd almost skipped it because I was exhausted from work. My hair was still damp from a rushed shower. I was in a black dress I'd worn too many times because it fit, and it didn't ask for attention. Daniel was leaning against the railing with a drink he barely touched, watching the party instead of joining it. That's what made me notice him. He looked like someone who'd been forced to attend a performance and was waiting for intermission. When our mutual friend introduced us, Daniel smiled politely, shook my hand, and said, "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else." I laughed because it was true. "And you look like you're calculating escape routes," I said. His eyes warmed, like I'd passed a test he hadn't told me I was taking. That was Daniel in the beginning. Observant, calm, slightly amused by the world. He wasn't the loudest man in any room, but he didn't need to be. People drifted toward him anyway. He listened. He made you feel like your words were worth holding. We started dating slowly. No dramatic fireworks, more like steady heat. He'd pick restaurants based on what I liked, not what was trendy. He'd text in full sentences. He'd show up on time. When my day was bad, he didn't try to fix me. He'd just sit beside me and let me breathe. After 2 months, I realized I'd stopped bracing for disappointment, and I let myself believe that meant something. By the time a year passed, we were living together in a modest apartment that felt like compromise in every direction. Small dining table, narrow kitchen, thin walls that carried neighbors' arguments. But Daniel made it feel like a home in the little ways. Folding laundry without being asked, buying the exact coffee I liked, remembering the names of my coworkers when I complained. He wasn't flashy, and back then I thought that meant he was safe. His social world, though, his real world, was louder than he was. Daniel had a tight friend group that moved like a pack. They'd known each other since college, the kind of people who spoke in inside jokes and called each other family, while casually tearing strangers apart for sport. His best friend, Jessica, was the unofficial leader, sharp tongue, perfect hair, always performing confidence like it was oxygen. Daniel used to say, "She's intense, but she means well." And I believed him because I wanted to. At first, his friends treated me like a novelty, the girlfriend who wasn't one of them. They'd smile too wide, ask me questions that weren't really questions. "So, Lena, what do you do again?" I'd answer, and they'd nod with polite interest, like they were filing me into a category that didn't matter. Daniel's sister, Lauren, was nicer on the surface but colder underneath, the kind of woman who could compliment your outfit while making you feel like you were borrowing it. And Daniel would squeeze my hand under the table like he was silently asking me to be patient, to understand, to not take it personally. I became skilled at being small in those moments. I laughed at jokes that weren't funny. I ignored the way Jessica would look Daniel up and down and say things like, "You could do so much better if you tried," and then glance at me like she'd forgotten I had ears. There were signs looking back, not huge explosions, more like tiny fractures. Daniel would come home late sometimes, claiming work drinks. His phone would light up, and he'd turn it face down without thinking. He'd be affectionate, but distracted, like his mind was always one step away from me, half present. Once I asked him casually, "Are you happy?" He blinked like the question was inconvenient. "Of course I am," he said quickly, and kissed my forehead like that sealed it. And I accepted it because love, in my mind, was supposed to be a decision, a commitment, something you stayed loyal to even when it got boring. But over the last 6 months, the air between us changed. Daniel started talking more about image, about ambition, about where we're going. Not we like partnership, we like performance. He began planning his birthday like it was a product launch, a huge event, a venue, a guest list full of coworkers and friends and people whose opinions he worshipped like currency. He'd come home stressed, snapping at small things. Then he'd soften again, suddenly sweet, like he could buy back balance with a smile. I noticed he spoke about his friends like they were judges. "Jessica thinks this theme is tacky. Lauren says that venue is too small. The girls are going to be there, so it has to be right." The girls. Not us. His birthday was 3 weeks away, and he didn't know I'd been planning a surprise for months. A trip to the coast, that boutique hotel he'd bookmarked on Instagram, dinner reservations at the restaurant where we'd had our first date, the kind of thoughtful details that say, "I see you, I remember you." And yes, there was something else. 2 months earlier, I had bought a ring, platinum, 1 diamond, simple, elegant, the exact style he'd pointed out in a jewelry store window last spring when he thought I wasn't paying attention. I'd stood there beside him with my hands in my coat pockets, pretending to admire a necklace while my mind recorded every detail of what made his eyes pause. I didn't buy it impulsively. I didn't buy it to trap him. I bought it because I believed we were building towards something. Because I believed Daniel's quiet steadiness was real. Because I believed, foolishly, that the person he was with me would be enough to protect us from the person he became around them. So that Tuesday night, when I heard him say, "She's sweet," something inside me didn't just suspect betrayal. It recognized it, like my body had been collecting evidence for months, and that single word finally made the case complete. And then he sat across from me in candlelight and told me, carefully, politely, that his friends didn't think I was impressive enough for him. As if love was a job interview. As if 4 years could be summarized into a ranking. As if I was supposed to beg to be chosen. But the truth is, Daniel had no idea what I had been quietly building behind the version of myself he thought was small. And if he wanted to aim higher, he was about to learn what it felt like to lose something priceless because he mistook silence for emptiness. The thing about betrayal is that it rarely arrives all at once. It leaks in. In tiny moments, you explain away because facing them would require you to rewrite the story you've been telling yourself about your life. After that Tuesday dinner, something shifted between Daniel and me, but not in a dramatic, explosive way. It was subtler, colder, like a door had been left ajar just enough for the outside air to creep in and make everything uncomfortable. He didn't apologize. That should have told me everything. Instead, he acted like we'd had a productive conversation, like he'd done me a favor by being honest, and now it was my responsibility to absorb it gracefully. The next morning, he kissed my cheek before work and said, "I hope you're not still upset." Not, "I'm sorry I hurt you." Just hope. I stood in the kitchen holding my coffee, watching him adjust his jacket in the mirror, and realized something unsettling. Daniel genuinely believed the problem was my reaction, not his words. Over the next few days, his behavior followed a pattern I recognized but had never named before. Distance, followed by charm. He stayed late at work more often. When I asked how his day was, he'd give vague answers, then change the subject. His phone buzzed constantly. Group chats, I assumed, but he angled the screen away without noticing he was doing it. Then, suddenly, he'd be affectionate. He'd bring home pastries, compliment my hair, say things like, "You know I admire how calm you are," in a tone that suggested calmness was my assigned role in the relationship. I started to feel like I was being managed. The birthday planning ramped up quickly. The event became all-consuming, at least for him. He talked about the guest list the way some people talk about a career move. Jessica thinks the guest list needs trimming. Lauren says optics matter. The girls think it'll say a lot about where I'm headed. Every time he said the girls, something inside me tightened. I'd met them dozens of times. I knew exactly how they looked at me, like I was temporary, like I was a placeholder while Daniel figured out his next upgrade. And Daniel never corrected them. One night, as he scrolled through his phone on the couch, I asked casually, "Did you tell them I'm not invited to your birthday?" He didn't look up. "It's not that you're not invited, it's just complicated." Complicated how? He sighed like I was exhausting him. "It's more of a work and friends thing. You wouldn't enjoy it." I stared at him. "You didn't even ask." He finally looked at me then, irritation flickering across his face. "Why are you making this into something it's not?" Because it was something. Because I'd been his partner for 4 years and was being quietly edited out of his life. Because I could feel myself being demoted from girlfriend to inconvenience. But I didn't argue. That's what hurts the most when I look back. I didn't fight him. Not because I agreed. Because part of me wanted to see how far he would go if I stayed still. The seeds of doubt kept piling up. Jessica stopped responding to my messages entirely. Lauren unfollowed me on social media without explanation. Mutual friends started acting careful, like they'd been told something about me and weren't sure how to behave. One afternoon, I overheard Daniel on a call in the other room. "I know," he said quietly. "I just don't want drama right now. I need this to go smoothly." I leaned against the hallway wall, heart pounding. Smoothly for who? That night, I lay awake while he slept beside me, his breathing even, his arm draped across my waist like possession instead of comfort. I replayed the dinner conversation over and over. "They think you're sweet and stable. They think I could do better. I think they might have a point." He hadn't said he didn't love me. He hadn't said he wanted to leave. But he'd planted something dangerous between us. The idea that love was conditional on performance. And once that idea takes root, it grows fast. I started noticing how often Daniel framed my qualities as limitations. "You're not very ambitious, but that's okay. You don't really like attention. You're more comfortable staying in than pushing forward." He spoke as if he knew me better than I knew myself. As if the version of me he saw, quiet, accommodating, steady, was the full story. He had no idea that behind the calm exterior, I was taking notes. That I was watching the way he rewrote our history in small, convenient ways. That I was remembering every moment he chose their approval over my dignity. And that I was already, quietly, emotionally preparing for the moment when pretending not to see would cost me more than walking away. The conflict didn't explode yet. It simmered. And I didn't know it then, but the next conversation, the next moment of honesty, was going to change everything. Because Daniel wasn't just questioning my worth. He was about to underestimate me in a way he would never recover from. The moment everything broke wasn't loud. It wasn't a fight with raised voices or shattered glass. It was quiet, surgical, delivered with the kind of calm that only comes when someone has already decided your fate and just needs you to accept it politely. It happened 2 nights after that Tuesday dinner. Daniel came home later than usual. Not drunk, not rushed, just resolved. He hung his coat, loosened his tie, and sat across from me at the same small dining table where I'd served him roast chicken days earlier. No candles this time, no pretense. "I've been thinking," he said. My body reacted before my mind did. My shoulders tightened. My pulse thudded in my ears. I recognized this tone now, the one people use when they're about to reframe cruelty as clarity. "About what?" I asked. "About us." He folded his hands like this was a business meeting. "About where I'm going, where I need to be." There it was again. Not we. "I don't think we're aligned anymore," he continued, "and I don't want to drag things out just because we've been together a long time." I studied his face, the familiar lines, the mouth I'd memorized, the eyes I used to trust. He looked relieved, like he'd been rehearsing this in his head and was glad to finally say it out loud. Aligned how? I asked quietly. He hesitated, then shrugged. Ambition, drive, presence, the way people see us. Us. I almost laughed at that. I've been getting a lot of feedback, he went on, from people who care about me, people who want the best for me. My chest tightened. Your friends? Yes, he said without apology. They've helped me realize I've been settling. The word landed hard. Settling. As if loving me had been a compromise he'd tolerated out of convenience. I felt heat rush to my face, not anger yet, something colder, sharper. And what do you want? I asked. He leaned back in his chair, exhaled. I want to explore what else is out there, see if there's someone who fits the version of my life I'm stepping into. I nodded slowly. My hands were shaking now, but I kept them folded in my lap. So, I said, you're breaking up with me. That's not how I'd put it, he said quickly. I just think we need space, perspective. I looked at him and finally understood something with terrifying clarity. Daniel didn't think this conversation would cost him anything. He thought I'd cry quietly, maybe ask questions, maybe try to prove myself. He thought I'd wait. I see, I said. He relaxed a fraction, mistaking my calm for agreement. I knew you'd understand. You're very mature about things like this. That word, mature, had always been his favorite way to describe me. It was also how he justified never choosing me publicly. I stood up. He blinked, confused. What are you doing? Ending the conversation, I said. He frowned. You're being dramatic. Am I? I asked, meeting his eyes. You've already decided. There's nothing left to discuss. That's not fair, he snapped. You're acting like I did something terrible. I looked at him then, really looked, and felt something inside me go still. You did, I said calmly. You just don't know it yet. I walked into the bedroom and began pulling my clothes from the closet, not angrily, not frantically, methodically, like someone completing a task they'd been preparing for longer than they realized. Daniel followed me, panic finally creeping into his voice. Lena, stop. You don't have to move out tonight. I'm not, I said. You are. His face went pale. What? The apartment's in my name, I said, zipping my suitcase. I'll give you time to collect your things. You can't just throw me out, he said, stunned. I'm not throwing you out, I replied. I'm letting you go explore. The silence between us was thick now, heavy. He stared at me, like I'd suddenly become someone he didn't recognize. Fine, he said finally, grabbing his keys. Maybe I will find someone better. I met his gaze without flinching. Good luck. And I meant it the way you mean luck when someone is about to learn a very expensive lesson. He paused at the door, waiting, hoping I'd stop him. I didn't. The door closed softly behind him. And that was the moment my life split cleanly in two, before the truth and after. Because once he left, I didn't cry. I walked into my home office, opened my laptop, and began making decisions. The Coastal Hotel reservation, canceled. The restaurant, canceled. The helicopter tour, canceled. But the birthday venue, the one he thought he was planning, that one stayed. And as I opened the drawer and set the ring box beside the thick folder I'd been quietly maintaining for months, full of documentation, numbers, proof, I realized something that steadied my breathing completely. Daniel thought this was the end. He had no idea it was only the beginning. When the door closed behind Daniel, the apartment didn't feel empty right away. It felt suspended, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do next. I stood there for a long time, one hand still resting on the desk, eyes fixed on nothing. My body hadn't caught up to the reality yet. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. That scared me more than panic would have. Because shock doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like calm competence moving on autopilot. I walked through the apartment and extinguished the candles one by one. The faint smell of smoke lingered in the air, mixing with roasted garlic and something bittersweet I couldn't name. I rinsed the wine glasses, set them upside down to dry, and stacked the plates neatly in the sink. Domestic closure. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let myself feel the weight of what had just happened. 4 years. 4 years of adjusting myself to fit the edges of someone else's life. 4 years of believing that stability was enough to earn loyalty. 4 years of swallowing small humiliations because I thought love meant endurance. And it had ended not with betrayal in a hotel room, but with a boardroom speech about ambition. I pressed my palms into my thighs, grounding myself, and asked the question that always comes after shock. What did I miss? I replayed moments I'd brushed off before. Daniel telling his friends I was low maintenance like it was a feature. Daniel letting Jessica talk over me at dinner. Daniel never correcting anyone when they implied he was carrying the relationship. I thought of the way he'd smiled when he told me I was understanding. Understanding had become my cage. My phone buzzed. A text from him. "Can we talk?" I think we both got emotional. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering. I knew exactly how that conversation would go. He'd soften his language, reframe his words, suggest compromise, expect me to meet him halfway back into something already broken. I deleted the message. Then I blocked the number. Not out of anger, out of clarity. Breakups aren't cinematic, they're administrative. I opened my laptop and started a list. Apartment lease, mine. Utilities, transfer. Subscriptions, cancel. Streaming services, remove his profile. Each task felt strangely soothing, a way of turning emotional chaos into order. The apartment had always been in my name. Daniel liked that. It made him feel unburdened. I called the landlord to ask about early termination options. He was surprised, but professional. "Life changes," he said kindly. "Yes," I replied, "it does." I deleted photos from my phone, not dramatically, just cleanly. Why keep evidence of a future that had never actually existed? My phone buzzed again. Another number. I didn't answer. Instead, I dialed my lawyer. "Mark," I said when he picked up, "I need to separate assets and make sure everything is clean." There was a pause on the other end. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said, "but it will be." We met later that morning in his downtown office. Glass walls, quiet efficiency, the kind of space that made emotional mess feel unprofessional. "Was he aware of the company?" Mark asked as we reviewed documents. "No." He nodded once. "Then this will be straightforward." We went through everything methodically. Accounts, investments, ownership structures. Numbers that told a story Daniel had never been invited into. Before I left, I hesitated. "One more thing. There's a birthday event in 2 weeks. I paid the deposit." Mark looked up. "And?" "I'm keeping it," I said. "I just need to make adjustments." He studied me for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Elegant," he said, "and entirely legal." That word, elegant, settled something inside me. On my way out, my phone rang. "Hello?" "Hi, Ms. Thompson. This is Rebecca from Highlands Resort, calling to confirm your reservation for the 22nd. The surprise trip." I closed my eyes briefly. "I need to cancel that." "Fully refundable," she said. "I can process it now." "Please do." That night, instead of going home, I went somewhere Daniel had never been. The real office. Not the corporate job where I kept my cover intact, but the warehouse space Kevin and I had turned into something real. Exposed brick, whiteboards filled with code, standing desks, 6 employees who believed in what we were building. Kevin looked up, surprised. "Didn't think you were coming in tonight." "Change of plans," I said. He didn't ask for details. He never did. We sat together reviewing projections, timelines, the board meeting scheduled for next week. "You okay?" he asked finally. I thought about the quiet apartment, the blocked number, the ring box in my drawer. "I will be," I said, "and when this is over, I'm done hiding." Kevin grinned. "About damn time." When I went to bed that night, in a new apartment I'd rented downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city, I slept better than I had in months. Not because it didn't hurt, but because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't lying to myself about who I was or what I deserved. And I had a feeling, deep, steady, unmistakable, that the worst of it wasn't behind me yet. It was gathering. The 2 weeks between the breakup and Daniel's birthday didn't pass quietly. They tightened. Like the air before a storm, everything sharper, more reactive, charged with things unsaid and messages I refused to read. Daniel tried every version of contact that didn't involve accountability. Unknown numbers, emails marked urgent, a single handwritten note slipped under the apartment door that said, "We should talk like adults." I didn't respond to any of it. Silence, I learned, is unbearable to people who rely on control. His friends escalated next. Jessica texted from a new number. "This is being blown way out of proportion. You're embarrassing him." Lauren followed on Instagram, then immediately unfollowed, like a digital knock meant to remind me they were watching. Mutual friends began checking in, their concern thinly veiled with curiosity. "Are you okay? What actually happened?" Daniel says things just got complicated. I could hear the narrative forming without me. I was emotional. I overreacted. I couldn't handle honesty. It was almost impressive how efficiently they worked together, how quickly they turned a man's decision into a woman's flaw. Meanwhile, Daniel showed up at the apartment once. I was already mostly moved out. Boxes stacked neatly, no chaos, no devastation on display. "You're really doing this?" he asked, standing in the doorway like a guest who'd overstayed his welcome. It wasn't a conversation, I replied calmly. It was a revelation. His jaw tightened. You're throwing away 4 years because your feelings got hurt. I met his eyes. No, I'm walking away because you told me exactly how little you valued me and expected me to stay grateful. He shook his head, frustrated. You're being childish. Goodbye, Daniel. I closed the door. That was the moment I felt the internal shift complete. Not rage, not grief. Detachment. The birthday party loomed like a quiet deadline. I finalized the guest list. Carefully. No drama, no additions, just adjustments. Names removed, names left untouched. Everyone Daniel wanted approval from stayed right where they were. Because assumptions need an audience. The night before the party, I barely slept. I lay in my new apartment, city lights painting slow reflections across the ceiling, and thought about the woman I'd been 4 years ago, the one who thought love meant endurance, that patience would be rewarded. At 3:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number, I answered. Please don't hang up, Jessica said, her voice breaking. Please. I sat up slowly. What happened? We're at the venue, she said, breathless. Final walkthrough, and... Lena, something's wrong. I stayed silent. They keep thanking you, she continued. The manager, the staff, they keep saying how generous you've been. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with inevitability. She told us she planned everything, Jessica whispered. She said she paid for it. And now? I asked. And now they showed us the invoice. I closed my eyes. My name? I asked. Yes. The date? 3 months ago. The total? She sobbed softly. Everything! I stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city moving on, without any idea what tomorrow would bring. She uninvited me 2 weeks ago, I said quietly, when she decided I wasn't impressive enough. Oh God, Jessica breathed. That dinner conversation, we didn't mean... She meant it, I cut in, and she used it. Silence stretched. The venue manager wants to know if you're still coming, Jessica said finally. What should I tell her? I didn't hesitate. Tell her I'll be there. What are you going to do? She asked, panic rising. I'm going to tell the truth, I said. And Jessica, tell the others to pay attention tomorrow. They're about to learn something important about assumptions. I hung up. In the quiet that followed, I felt something settle into place. Not revenge, alignment. The morning of the party, I dressed deliberately. Not the safe clothes, not the softened version of myself. I chose a tailored charcoal suit, sharp lines, clean structure, a white shirt, shoes that made a statement without asking permission. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw the same face, but a different posture. No apology. The venue buzzed with preparation when I arrived. The manager looked relieved and nervous all at once. Ms. Thompson, she said, we weren't sure. I'm here, I replied, and I'd like to make a small change to the schedule. Her eyebrows lifted. Of course. I'll give a toast after dinner, I said. I'll need a microphone and a screen. A screen? Just a few slides, I said, smiling slightly. Nothing elaborate. She nodded, already signaling staff. Guests began arriving at 7. I watched from the bar as Daniel's world filed in. Friends, co-workers, people who'd measured worth in volume and visibility. At exactly 7:30, Daniel arrived. New suit, confident stride, expecting applause. He didn't see me at first. Jessica did. Our eyes met across the room, and I watched her face crumble before she looked away. Dinner passed in a blur of clinking glasses and forced laughter. Daniel noticed me during the main course. I saw recognition hit him like a delayed impact. Shock, confusion, calculation. He stood halfway, sat back down, whispered urgently to Jessica. She shook her head. Dessert plates were cleared. The lights dimmed. The manager handed me the microphone. And in that moment, standing there calm and centered, I realized something profound. This wasn't about humiliating him. It was about refusing to stay invisible in a story where I'd done all the work. I stepped forward, and the room went silent. For a few seconds, I just stood there, under the lights, in front of people who had already decided who I was. The microphone felt heavier than it should have in my hand. I could hear my own breathing, slow, controlled, while the room waited, curious, expectant, impatient in that way crowds get when they think they're about to be entertained. This was the moment. And suddenly, every version of doubt I'd ever swallowed came rushing back. You're being dramatic. You're overreacting. This is unnecessary. You should just leave quietly. I looked out at the faces in front of me. Daniel's coworkers, his friends, people who'd smiled at me while quietly ranking me beneath him, people who'd nodded along while he painted me as sweet, stable, unremarkable. Daniel sat frozen at his table, color draining from his face. His hands were gripping the edge of the table like it might disappear beneath him. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked small, and that should have felt satisfying. Instead, it hurt, because this wasn't just his humiliation. It was the public autopsy of 4 years of my life. I thought about the woman I'd been when I met him, hopeful, grounded, believing that being chosen quietly was still being chosen. I thought about all the moments I'd stayed silent to keep peace, all the times I'd smoothed things over so he could feel impressive without competition. And standing there, I felt the full weight of what I'd lost. Not just him, but the version of myself who thought love required erasure. My chest tightened. For one terrifying second, I considered stepping back, handing the microphone to the manager, walking out and letting the narrative stand as it always had, letting him be the one who got to explain me. That was the darkest moment. Not because I was afraid of him, but because I was afraid of being seen, fully, honestly, without the softening filter I'd lived behind for years. My heart pounded, loud enough that I was sure the front tables could hear it. My palms were damp, my throat burned. "This is what it costs," a quiet voice inside me said. "This is what choosing yourself feels like." Daniel finally looked at me, not with arrogance, not with dismissal, but with fear. And I realized something with crystal clarity. If I walked away now, I would carry this silence forever. I would always wonder what my life might have looked like if I'd stood up straight when it mattered. I lifted the microphone. "Hi," I said, my voice steady despite everything happening inside me. A few people shifted uncomfortably. "For those of you who don't know me," I continued, "my name is Lena Thompson." Daniel flinched. "I was in a relationship with the birthday guest for 4 years," I said, "until 2 weeks ago." A ripple moved through the room. Whispers, heads turning, confusion sharpening into attention. "I'm not here to ruin anyone's evening," I said calmly. "I'm here because I paid for this party." That did it. Gasps, murmurs, chairs scraping. Daniel stood halfway out of his seat. "Lena." I raised a hand, not looking at him. "Please don't interrupt. I listened when it was your turn." Silence fell again, heavier this time. I gestured to the screen behind me. "I booked this venue 3 months ago. I paid for everything you've enjoyed tonight. The food, the bar, the music, because I loved him and wanted to celebrate his life." The first slide appeared. An invoice. My name, the date, the amount. I heard someone whisper, "Oh my God." The second slide followed, receipts. Not emotional ones, literal ones. Dates, trips, gifts, years of showing up, documented without commentary. "These aren't here to prove I'm generous," I said. "They're here to prove I was present." Daniel's friends stared at him now. Jessica had both hands over her mouth. 2 weeks ago, I continued, I was told I wasn't impressive enough, that I should understand, that aiming higher was reasonable. My voice wavered, just slightly. "And I did understand," I said. "I understood that I had been making myself smaller so someone else could feel bigger." The final slide appeared. My company's logo, the press release headline, the valuation, the projected growth. "I'm the co-founder and CEO of a data analytics company currently valued at $43 million, I said. "We signed a licensing deal with a Fortune 500 company 6 months ago." The room went dead silent. "I never told him," I said softly, "because I didn't want to be loved for potential or money. I wanted to be loved for who I was." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the ring box. "I was going to propose tonight," I said. That was the surprise. A collective inhale filled the room. "But instead," I said, closing the box, "you get the truth." I placed the microphone back on the stand. "I was impressive the whole time," I said, meeting Daniel's eyes for the first and last time. "I just didn't need to announce it to know my worth." I turned and walked away. Behind me, the room erupted, voices rising, questions spilling, reality crashing down on people who had been very comfortable judging without facts. I didn't look back. In the parking lot, the air was cold and clean. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, but release. I leaned against my car and finally let the tears come. Not sobs, just quiet, exhausted tears for the woman who had survived loving someone who never truly saw her. This wasn't triumph. It was grief, with boundaries. And it was the last moment I would ever make myself small for someone else's comfort. I sat in my car with the engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel, listening to my heart slow down. The noise from the venue still spilled into the night, voices raised, doors opening and closing, the distant echo of chaos I had chosen not to witness. I stared straight ahead, breathing in through my nose, out through my mouth, grounding myself in the present moment. This was the point of no return. Not because I'd embarrassed him, but because I had finally stopped protecting someone who never protected me. My phone vibrated against the console. Once, twice, again. I didn't look. I drove. No destination. just movement. City lights streaking past like a different life unfolding outside the window. After an hour, I pulled over by the waterfront and shut the engine off. The water reflected neon and street lamps in broken patterns, beautiful and fractured at the same time. That's when I checked my phone. 47 missed calls, 62 messages, 3 voicemails. Most from Daniel. Some from numbers I didn't recognize. One from Jessica. I listened to hers first. Lena. I don't know what to say. After you left, he tried to explain it away. Said you exaggerated. Said the company wasn't really yours. I closed my eyes. But then Lauren pulled up the Forbes article, she continued, voice shaking. Your picture. CEO and co-founder. No one said anything. They just stared at him. I pictured it clearly, the illusion cracking in real time. She kept asking why you'd hide something like that, Jessica said. And someone asked why he'd never once talked about your work. He didn't have an answer. There was a long pause. He's been calling everyone, crying. Not because he hurt you, because he got caught underestimating you. I deleted the rest of Daniel's messages without reading them. Not out of cruelty, out of completion. 3 weeks later, the story went public. The Invisible Founder. How Lena Thompson built a $43 million company while everyone looked the other way. It went viral overnight. By noon, our website had crashed. Tech blogs picked it up. Opinions split quickly. Some people called me inspirational. Some called me petty. A few questioned my stability. I didn't respond to any of it. Because the truth doesn't need defense, it just needs time. That same week, a woman named Elena reached out. She worked with Daniel in marketing. We met for coffee on a quiet afternoon. She looked nervous, like someone carrying information she wasn't sure she should share. I need to tell you something, she said, because I've been complicit in silence before and I won't be again. She told me how Daniel talked about me at work. She's sweet but boring. She's stable, not ambitious. I'm kind of settling until I figure out my next move. Slack messages, casual cruelty disguised as humor. I listened without interrupting, not because it didn't hurt, but because it finally fit. When you revealed the truth at the party, Elena said quietly, half the office started asking questions. Not just about you, about him. HR got involved, not because of the party, but because the party made people look closer. A week later, Daniel was let go. Not dramatically, procedurally. Pattern of misrepresentation. Taking credit. Narrative control. Consequences. The real turning point came 2 months later in a glass-walled conference room with Summit Capital. Margaret Chen, lead partner, looked at me across the table. You've had a very public personal situation, she said evenly. Some of my partners are concerned about stability. I nodded. That's fair. I didn't defend myself. I explained. I spent 2 years building this company quietly because I believed being small was safer. That belief nearly cost me everything that mattered. I won't make that mistake again. I advanced the slide showing our growth. I'm ready to be visible, I'm ready to scale, and I'm ready to lead. Margaret studied me for a long moment. You know what impressed me most about the article? She said finally. Not the story, the discipline, profitability from year one, control, patience. She smiled. We're interested. The deal closed at $127 million, with milestones that could push it past 200 within 2 years. Kevin cried when we signed. So did I. Not because of the money. Because I'd built something real, without applause, and finally allowed it to be seen. That night, alone in my apartment, I opened the ring box one last time. I didn't feel regret. I felt gratitude for the clarity I never would have chosen, but desperately needed. The power had shifted, not because I proved him wrong, but because I no longer needed him to be right. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They fell in layers, quiet, unavoidable, and entirely of his own making. Daniel tried to regain control of the story first. He told people I had set him up, that I'd been hiding things on purpose, that the presentation was manipulative. But narratives only work when no one checks the facts. And once people started checking, everything unraveled. His friends stopped defending him one by one, not publicly, never that brave, but in the small, telling ways that matter more. Invitations dried up. Group chats went quiet. Jessica stopped answering his calls. Lauren avoided his name entirely. The same people who had once encouraged him to aim higher didn't want to be associated with the fall, because ambition is attractive until it's exposed as entitlement. At work, the shift was immediate. After the party, colleagues started asking questions. Not about me, about him. Why did he always talk like he was funding things he clearly wasn't? Why did his stories never quite line up? Why did his achievements sound inflated when put next to verifiable records? HR didn't fire him because of me. They fired him because once the illusion cracked, everything else became visible. Patterns, credit taking, misrepresentation. The party didn't end his career. It just removed the camouflage. Meanwhile, my life didn't explode outward. It stabilized. Quietly. Powerfully. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post. I didn't give interviews beyond what was necessary for the company. I let the work speak for itself. People expected drama. What they got was distance. 3 months after the party, I was standing in the lobby of the new building I'd purchased for our headquarters. Glass, steel, sunlight pouring into open spaces where 200 people were building something that mattered. That's when Daniel showed up. He looked smaller. Not physically, energetically, like someone who had been carrying a story that no longer worked. "Lena," he said softly, "I know you blocked me. I'm sorry to ambush you." I didn't invite him inside. "How did you find me?" I asked. He gave a weak smile. "Forbes, TechCrunch, Bloomberg. You're not exactly hard to locate anymore." "If you came for closure," I said, "you already got it." "I know," he said quickly. "That's not why I'm here." He took a breath, like this was something he'd practiced. "I've spent the last 6 months trying to understand how I became that person," he said. "How I measured people like commodities. How I took credit for things I didn't earn." I watched him carefully, not with hope, with clarity. "And?" I asked. "I grew up being told I had to be exceptional to matter," he said. "So I learned to look exceptional, even if it meant making everyone else look ordinary." There was a pause. "With you, it was easy. You were hiding how extraordinary you were. I didn't have to tear you down. I just had to maintain the illusion." The honesty was late, but real. "I see that now," he said. "Real worth doesn't require diminishing others. Real confidence doesn't need constant validation." I nodded. "That's true. I lost my chance," he said quietly. 4 years to see you, to ask questions, to build something real. And I destroyed it because comfortable lies felt safer than uncomfortable truth. I felt no triumph, only distance. "I hope you figure it out," I said. "But that work isn't mine to do with you." "I know," he said. "I just needed to say it and to let you go." He hesitated, then added, "I've been correcting the record, telling people the truth about who paid for what, about the company you were building while I was telling everyone you were mediocre." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. He looked at the building behind me, the movement, the people. "You know what the worst part is?" he said softly. "I realize now I could have been part of this, but I was so afraid of your potential that I never faced my own." "That's something you'll have to live with," I said. He nodded. "So will I." He left without asking for anything, and for the first time, I believed him. Because regret talks about loss. Remorse talks about harm. And this time, he wasn't asking me to make him feel better about either. I watched him go, feeling nothing but relief. The fallout wasn't explosive. It was educational, and it landed exactly where it belonged. That weekend, I drove alone up the coast. No schedule. No notifications, just a small rented house perched on a cliff, the ocean stretching endlessly in front of me like a promise that didn't need explanation. I spent 2 days doing almost nothing, walking the beach, reading without checking the time, drinking coffee while watching the light shift across the water. It was the first time in years I'd been alone without feeling abandoned. Sunday morning, I woke before dawn and walked barefoot down to the shore. The sand was cold, damp beneath my feet. The sky hovered in that quiet in-between color, purple and gray, right before the sun decides to exist. I stood there thinking about the woman I used to be. The woman who believed love meant patience without limits. The woman who softened her edges so someone else could feel sharp. The woman who mistook being chosen quietly for being chosen fully. My phone buzzed. "Margaret, from Summit Capital. Board wants to discuss international expansion. London, Singapore. Are you interested in taking this global?" I looked out at the horizon as the sun finally broke through, turning the water gold. "Very interested," I typed back. "Let's talk Monday." Behind me, the beach began to fill. Families setting up umbrellas, couples walking hand in hand, surfers carrying boards toward the waves. Life continuing, indifferent to my transformation. And that's when it hit me. My life hadn't become extraordinary because I proved someone wrong. It became extraordinary because I stopped asking permission to exist at full volume. Daniel didn't destroy me. His friends didn't define me. Their judgment didn't shape my worth. What changed everything was this. I stopped confusing silence with humility and endurance with love. If you've ever felt invisible in your own relationship, if you've ever been called sweet when what they really meant was convenient, if you've ever made yourself smaller so someone else wouldn't feel threatened, Hear this clearly. Real love does not require you to disappear. Real confidence does not need an audience. And real worth will always surface, whether people are ready for it or not. The truth doesn't destroy relationships. It only destroys the ones that survive on illusion. Choose truth. Choose yourself. The world will adjust.